Hello friends, it's Lionheart here, and yes, I am sleepy. But as promised, it is time for my choices for the Balance Council. This is coming out with just under 6 days to go. By the time you see it, maybe it'll be 5. Who knows? But these are my votes. Now remember, here are the caveats. It's a personal decision, but I will explain each of my votes and why I feel they should be relevant. There are plenty of honourable mentions, and I know lots of other content creators and indeed pros are also putting their lists out, and I think that's amazing. I might not agree with all of the choices, but I do love that we're having that open and honest discussion and an attempt at collaboration to be able to actually move forward and collectively make Gwent better, not just nerf everything that sees decent play into the ground until we have the world's most boring mid-range meta. Because I played that version of Gwent and it was really dull. So hopefully we don't undo the 2+ years of great work the dev team did. Without any further ado, to the Balance Council. So here we go, and we are in the Balance Council. Now, you can already see my votes over there. Spoilers, I know. Maybe I could have made a filter so that they came down. Well, it's too late for that now, but I am going to run you through each decision and why I made it. And let's start off with Harold Gord. I love this card because I always liked Spelleteal and the various different things that Gord was played in. When this card had no cap, it was a really powerful finisher in a short round. It allowed some of those Scoia'tael decks to play longer so that it could end up with a 3-card round, and Gord was there to save the day. You could build a game plan around this card. But with the cap of only +12, it never feels like quite enough. This card is 15 points typically. It can be as many as 17 if you're tutoring it, but it just doesn't feel good enough anymore. And we can't change the ability, but we can change his total boost if we buff his base power. Base power buffs are not always the most impactful compared to provisions. This is an example of where it can be. Will 1 base power be enough to make Gord actually good? I don't know. Is Gord terrible now? No, it's not. But do I think a lot of those lists would benefit from him switching again? Yes. Obviously, I'm Scoia'tael focused here, but Crime's having some sort of short round payoff slam. Gord is kind of power crept more there because usually those lists are probably running bounty as well, and they have just so much. The brute and stuff like that tend to be much better in those spots. So even the basic Ignatius Hail is an 18. Yes, it's more provisions, but you see the point. So it probably doesn't ever have a home back in Syndicate now, which is sad, but it could have in Scoia'tael. Afro Singer. It's a nice and simple one. I love the card. I think it's really fun, and I don't think it's ever actually seen that much play. Typically, it can play for sort of an 8 for 5 on deploy. See, it's 4 base power, it heals the unit by 2, and then it heals so it spawns a Deafening Siren. I love the card, and I love the idea of a heal-style archetype rather than just being super focused on Geddy-style druids. This could be really fun, but it just has never felt worth it. And a base power buff here won't rewrite history, but it will make it just that little bit less removable. If it's got a chance to stick on the board, even for an extra 1 or 2 turns, this all of a sudden becomes quite a scary object. I'd love to see it. Simple as that. This will be the fastest thing I ever say. I cannot believe I have ended up having to vote to buff this. The only reason this was nerfed is because people wanted to break something, and I stand by it. Are Reavers fun? No. Are they fun to play with? No. Are they fun to play against? Honestly, no. Should we be trying in the very first patch to break something to make it unplayable? Probably no. It's the sign of a dead game. It's the sign of a game that is no longer being looked after when some stuff doesn't work, and we really shouldn't be starting that way. Let's do better. I get Reavers are tedious in this, but I really, yeah. This one just made me sad and makes me firmly believe that if Golden Nekker was breakable, as was potentially going to be the case, it also would have got a nerf just because people quite like to see things fall to pieces. Makes me sad. not that I want to see this, not that we're going to see it even if it's buff, because it was terrible before and it'll be terrible after, but I have had to waste a vote on it just on principle. Madame Serenity, we're into the nerfs, and I think people are hugely underestimating how good this card is. It is literally a double thin, triple engine play, which was one of the most influential things that made Syndicate great in the most recent set of qualifiers, because of the amount of tempo and sheer power that this would give you, because it's not just double thinning and 3 engines. One of those engines, this one, is coin generation. One of them is constant, but also even the tribute. Getting all of that value back if you were going down that route from the King of Beggars. It is just an all-round powerhouse of a card. And this being at 5 was just that little bit less removable. Again, I do think it's a 13 provision card. I'm not necessarily set that it's a 14 provision card yet, just because the 2 engines it thins are power crept themselves to some degree, because they're potentially 1-point engines each. They're not the most terrifying thing, but when there's 3 of them in a single turn, it is a lot. So I think a power nerf here is reasonable. I did notice when I was looking through, because I'm trying to catch what other creators and pro players say, this was one that Pireball, for instance, was championing as well. And I do hope to see this, because I do think it is quite the powerful sort of big play that could use just a little bit of a tweak. In my chances, I'm trying to buff more than I nerf. While power decreases are typically nerfs, it would be a buff to Kraken to remove one of its base power. Why? Because it's disloyal. It's disloyal at 5 power. Yes, technically its ceiling is lower, because of course the aim is to bring it back to your side, so you also lose that point. But you're more likely to kill it, meaning that while the ceiling is lowered, the average value is increased. Lowering the power on this, I think, would be a buff, and it would be a really nice to see this card get a little bit more play. Nice and simple for me there. And that is exactly the same reason why Lara Doran is in this list. And in case you did hear that little alert noise, it was in fact your PC, not mine. So if you could not interrupt my video, that'd be great. Lara Doran is the exact same. I love the card. I think it's a real shame this is on a Wild Hunt card. I know it synergizes with Frostbite. You know what I mean. This goes in Araka Swarm control. This doesn't go in Wild Hunt. Either way, I love the ability. I think it's fantastic, and it's nice to see Lara Doran in the game. Equally, the second time you're trying to proc her, it is a lot harder in every deck. Her being 1 power less would be a big difference. As a result, I'm voting to buff it, even though it's using one of my nerfs. These ones are pretty quick, and they are reversions. Reversions? Reverting? Reversion? Something. Who voted for Siege to get a buff? Who did it? Who? Because I can't find a single person that did, yet this is 13 provisions. This is not a 13 provision scenario. Haunt is a 13 provision scenario. I know I haven't voted for it, but I ran out of votes, okay? Vote for Haunt. This is not a 13 provision scenario. It's got to go back to 14. It is nuts. I played it at the start of the season. You saw the YouTube video. If you didn't, go watch it. What are you doing here? No, absolutely not. Everything I just said about Siege, literally, word for word, the same. Who voted for this? What are you doing? This is not a third. No. No. Back to 14. I thought this would be controversial, but I don't see how it could be. This is such a good card. I love Frenzied Dow. It is a 7 for 7 that thins and therefore does damage. It's way too good, way too consistent. Because of the thinning and the damage that goes with it, this card has now started appearing, even without other constructs, just to have a singular Rock Barrage, thin, and damage. And not just in some decks, this is becoming a little bit too easy to just throw in, effectively. I feel like this would be a little bit fairer at 8 provisions. It's not the top of my list because those 2 NR cards really just feel crazy to me at 13, but I think this deserves to be an 8. I don't know if it's controversial. If you think it is, let me know. If you think this is as it should be, like, I wouldn't be heartbroken if this stayed as it is, but it is falling into that too frequent kind of pile for me now of mid-range neutrals. Trying to race through these. Oh, it's Draug. Oh, I'll probably get in trouble for saying that this was the closest to getting a buff that just missed out in the first window. I would love to see Draug just get that little bit of extra love. You know, Draug these days, is he a 13 provision card? I know he's a high-end card, and with the buff to Revenants, obviously that's great, but I think seeing him at 12, we might have a chance at getting some play, and I love that. I don't love Commandos, and it does tend to pair with them, but the card's just so beautiful. I want to see it. I want to see it. I might regret it, because it might turn into an Igni meta, but you know what? On my head be it. I stammed Portal last time. I am here again, asking for your help with Portal. Is it better at 11? Yes, it is. Was 11 the goal? No, it wasn't. At 11, this card is a little more playable, but at 10 provisions, it's actually going to find places in multiple different decks, potentially. And I think that would actually be really nice. I loved what Portal used to do. I think this version of Portal is much slower than the original, just double bang, tempo thin. And I think this would have a really nice home at 10 provisions. I think it could actually shake a few things up, bring a couple of things back into viability with some of those just point slam 4 provision cards. There's lots of things we've seen over the years that used to do it, and I kind of miss it. It would be nice to see Portal get some love again. So it is back for me for a second month. And last, but by no means least, yes, I'm a Scoia'tael stan, let's move on. Bountiful Harvest. Now, you can consider this proposed buff to 5 provisions as a buff to Spellatiel. You can consider it a buff to Symbiosis. You can consider it a buff to Hand buff. I would say Elves because it spawns Elves, but that's a real stretch. I love this card when it had a smaller pool of options to spawn from. It was worth running. And now at 6 provisions, it just doesn't feel like it is, because the range of options is just so huge. You can get 3 cards that just do nothing for you, or you can end up with the movement engine you're looking for, the Purify you want. The range on this card results, for me, in it feeling more like a 5 provision. You know, at 5, I think this would see a decent amount of play in the archetypes I've just mentioned, when at 6, it just cannot get in. I'd personally love to see it. I miss the card. What do you think? Are you going to go with me with my votes? Or do you think I'm completely crazy? Have I missed something super obvious that you're like, Lionheart, seriously? And I know you're all going to say Compass. I stand by this. Compass was designed as a 9 provision card. It doesn't exist at 10. It should be a 9 provision card. We could nerf stuff around it to make it better. But for me, I would much rather it see play. I'm kind of happy because it's a card that's obviously going to spend a lot of time rotated in, then rotated out. But that's kind of where it belongs, because it is a very strong card. I will say it here for the final time, how I wanted Compass to be balanced. This card, its first version isn't a problem. We all know it's the second version. I wanted the second version to be exactly the same as it is now, with one caveat. If you have 0 cards in your hand, as this is played, so this is your last card, it can only play legendaries not in your deck of 9 provisions or lower. For every card remaining in your hand, it can create an extra provision. So, if there's 1 card left in your hand, it can play 10, 2, 11, 3, 12, you can count. If this was the case, it would take this to still being versatile, fun, and really interesting, but it wouldn't feel like a last say Swiss Army knife in a way that it genuinely does a lot of the time, especially in Golden Necker decks. So I wish that's what we'd done. Obviously we haven't. It is what it is. I am acutely aware this will end up at 10 provisions. I really do hope that it then bounces back to 9 and we get to cycle through, because there are so many amazing fun decks that can be played with this, and I personally don't believe that while it is great, I think it's nowhere near as insanely OP as people claim it is on a patch day after everything we were playing got nerfed. So obviously I'm taking that from personal experience. My perspective of playing it some feedback from other players who are at, for instance, 2500 plus, saying it just isn't seen. Obviously, between rank 3 and rank 1, it's going to be there a lot, and 2450 below, you're going to see lots of different decks of it, but I don't know. I love the card. Can it be frustrating sometimes? Yes. I enjoy it. So, no, I'm not going to vote for it. God, that was a long rant, wasn't it? Anyway, thank you for watching. If you're still here, amazing job. Do me a favor, click the like. It goes a long way. I'm trying to aim for as many videos as possible to get above 200 likes. We're starting to tick over it regularly. It would be so cool if we could do it again. Thank you for watching, friends. Really appreciate you. Take care.